Hope you have had a good week. J'espère que c'était un bon quelques jours qui ont passé.
I hope you've had a good few days since the last time we were here together.
For the 121st meeting of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, c'est le 120e.
This is meeting number 121 of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs.
Colleagues, we are continuing our study on the question of privilege related to cyber attacks targeting members of Parliament. Friendly reminder, as always, as we begin, please ensure that your audio devices are placed securely on the stickers to either side of you in order to protect the health and well-being of our translators who do such important work for us. Colleagues, we are joined by a number of our parliamentary colleagues today. So the format remains the same. Rien qui change avec le format.
Nothing has changed with respect to the format.
Members of Parliament James Bazan from Selkirk Interlake Eastman, Garnet Jennis, the Member of Parliament for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, and the Honourable John McKay, the Member of Parliament for Scarborough Guildwood. Each witness will be given the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes, and then we will proceed into our regular opening round. Gentlemen, I'm not sure who wants to begin. I'm not sure if you've had a conversation amongst yourselves, but do we have a volunteer in terms of who would like to go first? Mr. Jennis? Okay. So, Mr. Jennis, with that, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes in your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. The material facts of this case have already been laid out in the House. I am happy to repeat them in response to questions, but I'll use my opening statement to instead make some specific arguments about what we can learn from this situation. Generally speaking, we expect a high level of secrecy when it comes to national security. While in a free democracy, people should generally have access to information about what the government is up to, information pertaining to national security is closely guarded because it could be used against us by adversaries. On the other hand, it is a well-established principle of national security that information must be shared with citizens if they need that information to defend themselves. For example, if we were at war and a particular area faced imminent bombardment...
Mr. Jennis, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
I'm just hearing from translators that your pace is a little bit quick.
Okay.
So if you could just slow it down, and I'll be generous in terms of making sure that if that costs 30 seconds, that in order for the well-being of translators to be adhered to, we offer that to you. Yes, Ms. Romanato?
On that same note, I understand that Mr. Duncan had requested that witnesses provide their speaking points in advance of the meeting. Were they provided to us? I'm not sure if the interpreters have them.
I don't know the answer to that, Ms. Romanato. They were. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Jennis, I've stopped the clock. You've got 4 minutes, 15 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your indulgence. On the other hand, it is a well-established principle of national security that information must be shared with citizens if they need that information to defend themselves. For example, if we were at war and a particular area faced imminent bombardment, we would expect the government to warn citizens of the attack so that they could shelter themselves. We would not expect government to keep that information secret, obviously. If a terrorist planted a bomb in a building, we would expect that the building be immediately evacuated, not that the government would keep the information secret simply because the information involved security. What is obviously true of physical attacks should, based on an extension of the same principle, also apply in the more benign cases of cyber and other kinds of foreign attacks. The principle remains that the victim or potential victim has a natural right to know so that they can defend themselves. But moreover, foreign interference is a particular case where exposure is a central part of the solution. The impact of foreign disinformation is significantly reduced when people become aware of the source, because in this way it is exposed as propaganda and loses its persuasive power. Foreign takeovers of institutions can be undone in their impact simply through exposure, and politicians who are identified as foreign collaborators are less likely to be re-elected. When people are aware that the source of something is a hostile foreign state, that awareness may dissolve the impact of the threat. The current government has used national security as an excuse for keeping secret information related to foreign interference that it actually would be in the national interest to expose, where exposing that information would protect victims and reduce the overall impact. Three known examples of this phenomenon are the secrecy that long surrounded the Winnipeg lab documents affair, the failure to inform members of Parliament of threats against them or their family, which resulted in 2 separate questions of privilege recognized by the Speaker, and the current insistence of the government on keeping secret the names of parliamentarians who have intentionally collaborated with hostile foreign states. It is hard to see how the public interest was or is served by secrecy in any of these cases. When it comes to foreign interference, we should be strategically declassifying certain information precisely as a tool to fight against interference. The government's defense of their failure to inform me of threats against me was that they told the House of Commons about these threats and that they respect the role of the House of Commons as a separate institution from the executive. In response to this, I would make 5 observations. First, as you know, I was targeted at my personal email, and House of Commons IT were informed about attacks on parliamentary accounts. So I suspect administration here wasn't even informed of the attack on me because it had nothing to do with their jobs. Secondly, we have still not heard clear testimony regarding what information exactly was shared with House IT and when, whether it was merely technical details or the full robust picture that had been shared with our intelligence services by the FBI. Without the full picture, it would have been hard for us to be briefed. Thirdly, the government's argument seems to badly misunderstand the nature of the work expected of IT professionals. House of Commons IT are not an intelligence or communication service. They work on IT. It would seem strange in principle for those IT professionals to have decided of their own accord to walk about the building and talk to parliamentarians about the threats they face. Fourthly, CSE acknowledged in their testimony that there were likely caveats associated with the information shared that prevented House of Commons employees from resharing the information without permission. I would suggest that the committee send for more and clearer information about what exactly was shared with House of Commons IT services, when, and with what caveats. And finally, the underlying logic of the government's argument for secrecy is deeply flawed, because the rights and privileges of members of Parliament are vested in them as members of Parliament. Those rights are what enable us to do our jobs for our constituents. Those rights can be given up or modified by the agreement of the House, but they are not held, controlled, or modifiable by House administration. The way to respect the rights and independence of members of Parliament is to give them the tools and the information that they need. The government's argument here implies that House administration is the holder of our rights as opposed to members themselves, and that is, of course, dead wrong. Chair, that's my opening statement, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jennis. Mr. Bazan or Mr. McKay? Mr. Bazan. Okay, the floor is yours, sir, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. So I am also one of the 18 members of Parliament and senators who are members of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, and ABT 31 targeted us way back in 2021 and 2022. Now, what is shocking is that us as parliamentarians were never informed that we were the subject matter of a hack attempt, cyber attack by the communist regime in China. I would say that by letting us know that parliamentarians, we can then take protective and corrective actions, but we couldn't because we were never told. We were not informed of this by the House of Commons IT services. We were not informed of it by the RCMP. We were not briefed by CSIS, nor did CSE reach out to us, who ultimately found out through the FBI and informed the House of Commons IT services. But all of us did get briefed on May the 9th by the FBI. That is, I think, embarrassing. That was the way that we were finally told about how the attack occurred and how we could protect ourselves. Now, I have to say that Sergeant at Arms in the past has, it was offering a briefing to us this afternoon on, it's unclassified, but it's on how we protect ourselves from cybersecurity attacks and what type of measures we take. CSE has briefed me in the past and others who were targeted on social media by misinformation, disinformation from the PRC. And, of course, all of us that have traveled and have been given burner phones either by the House of Commons or by Global Affairs or by Department of National Defense in our parliamentary activities have received those briefings for travel. So I may be in a little bit better understanding of the cybersecurity threats that are out there than others, but that doesn't make the actions that was taken by the House of Commons and those in charge acceptable. Because this isn't an isolated incident. This is happening all the time, and we need to be better informed. Now, the PRC has been spying on me for a while, and then it's, I got activities. I'm a patron of Hong Kong Watch. I'm the member of the Canada-Taiwan Parliamentary Friendship Group, along with many of you. A number of us at this table have traveled to Taiwan just as recently as last year. You know, Iran is also named in the NSICOP report, and I'm a co-founder of the Canadian Parliamentarians for Human Rights and Democracy in Iran. You know, I was very big on the charge to get the Quds Force listed as a terrorist organization in 2012. I led in government to shut down the Iranian embassy and consulates here in Canada, and I've been recognized by the Persian community for my advocacy. And of course, the Russian Federation has been targeting me on social media, you know, with trolls, not with bots, for a long time. I was one of the first group of 13 that was banned from Russia back in 2014. I'm vice president of the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Friendship Group. I've been outspoken in my support of Ukraine. So, of course, you know, Russia is going to take actions against us and any of us that are advocates for Ukraine. I brought forward the Sergei Magnitsky law. So why does all that matter? All my activities that are beyond what many would say is my scope as a parliamentarian, my day-to-day activities. Well, modern espionage, intimidation, foreign interference tactics are violating our collective rights, our privilege, but also our privilege as individuals. So this is the new norm. And, you know, Boss Gagnon, the Speaker's ruling, you know, referenced, you know, page 107 and 108, and that we have to make sure that members should be able to go about their parliamentary business undisturbed. Assaulting, threatening, or insulting a member during a proceeding of Parliament or while the member is circulating within the precinct is a violation of the rights of Parliament. You know, it is also said on page 111, a member may also be obstructed or interfered with the performance of his or her parliamentary functions by non-physical means. And so, you couldn't hear that? Okay, I'll slow down a bit.
Yeah,
So
about
that's
45
you know, directly
seconds,
out of Bosque Gagnon, page 107, 109, and page 111. So we have to modernize our efforts to protect our privilege from cyber attacks. It's no different than a physical obstruction or interference in performing our duties. And that particularly is concerning to me. You know, I'm the Conservative Shadow Minister for National Defence. I'm Vice Chair of the Standing Committee on National Defence, and John's as Chair. You know, we serve on these committees. We talk about information. I provide advice to our leader. We develop policy and platform ideas. So if I'm being targeted to try to hack into my emails and my communications, Mr. Chair, and I know I'm getting close on time, then we have to take corrective measures. And the laissez-faire, we don't care, coming from the PMO, PCO, is that culture is infiltrated through the rest of our departments and the way we operate up here. We have to make sure that we are more aggressive in how we protect each and every one of us from these cyber attacks, and that means that we need to know and we have to reclassify how information is shared.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Bazan. Mr. McKay, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll just pick up where James left off, which is the core issue that is in front of this committee. And that is, when should members be informed of these attacks? These attacks are simply a fact of life, and they are massive, and they will increase. And I'm rather hoping that this committee will grapple with how, when, and where we are to be notified of these attacks. Because, frankly, I'm given to understand there's something like 1 million attacks a day on this organization as a Parliament of Canada. So I don't think every member wants to be informed of every one. So I think in some respects we're in a fortunate position in that the evidence at this point shows that we didn't actually suffer any damage, that there was no breach, that the firewalls held. Having said that, it is, and I adopt my friend's views, it is kind of embarrassing to learn from a foreign security service that we've actually had an attack. And I don't think that's, frankly, quite acceptable. So the FBI tells CSE, CSE tells our security services are satisfied that the breach does not occur, and we're in the dark. And we're in the dark for 2 years, and we only find out about these attacks by virtue of an unsealing of a FBI document. When we were briefed by the FBI, the representative of the FBI told us that they felt, I think he used the word outgunned, 50 to 1. that these attacks are massive, and the FBI itself feels overwhelmed. So this committee needs, in my view, to start wrestling with our protocols. Clearly, the current protocols are not acceptable. For 2 years, the three of us, plus all of our other colleagues, were quite vulnerable. And you'll have to excuse me while I hang up on my wife. That's not a good thing to do. Yeah.
Sounds like
Domestic
that sounds
interference.
like
That's right.
that sounds like a
great
point
line.
of her privilege, Mr.
That's a
McKay.
great
But continue.
That's the only privilege I care about. Yes. Yes. No, dear. Yeah. Yeah. Not by much, though. So I'm rather hoping that this committee actually gets to the nub of it. I'm not interested in the blame game. I'm not interested in we should have done this or this done that. Protocols need to be established. And because everyone at this table and every one of our colleagues is vulnerable. I'm rather hoping you take this example of vulnerability, which I don't think has entered into any kind of damage, but take this example of vulnerability and give instructions to those who we ask to protect us. We are all engaged. And I adopt James's view that we are all engaged in multiple activities which create a vulnerability and is within our purview as members of Parliament, our privileges as member of Parliament. So I support Garnett's motion, but I do want this committee to focus on the protocols that would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. Okay, colleagues, we will head into the first round of questions. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. The committee received a chronology of events from CSE. In the chronology, it states that CSIS issued a briefing on the Beijing-directed APT-31 cyber attack to 35 Government of Canada clients as early as November of 2021. I asked the director of CSIS who received this briefing. He has undertaken to provide this committee with a list, but he did say that as a general rule, quote, such a product would indeed be distributed to the PCO, and that would include the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, end of quote, of that of the Prime Minister. So what does it say to you about the fact that as early as November 2021, 35 Government of Canada clients, including likely the Prime Minister's own department, the PCO, were briefed about this cyber attack, but you and every other member of Parliament who was the target was kept in the dark? Whoever wishes to.
Happy to respond to that. I think Mr. Cooper, you've hit the core issue. We were not on the distribution list, shall we say, and you know the protocols at that time 2 years ago are frankly found to be inadequate, and I'm hoping that this committee will actually address that issue, because it's not acceptable that we are in the dark for the last 2 years.
I'll just jump in on this. So you have, information shared to government officials, National Security Advisor, who, as we read in the NSCOP report, withheld information from people that should be informed. That information should have been shared with us as individuals as a matter of attack. I think that when you look at the culture that exists within the Government of Canada on how they classify information, how they share information, especially when it comes down to foreign intimidation, and this APT-31 is nothing more than foreign intimidation again. that we have to be taking new protocols and how we deal with it. And so the National Security Advisor has to be a lot more aggressive in making sure that that information percolates through the system. And not just to the Prime Minister, but in this situation where it's involving members of Parliament, caucuses, whether it's through caucus leaders and caucus chairs, that information should be distributed or individuals contacted directly. And I think that, we need to make sure that we don't repeat these mistakes again. And I think that is paramount to our ability to do our jobs.
Janice?
I agree with what my colleagues have said, and thank you for an important question, Mr. Cooper. Just one point to add in terms of the dissemination of information. In the previous hearings with previous witnesses, we have tried to get at what exact information was disseminated, in particular what information was disseminated to House of Commons administration, because the government's communication on this has said, well, the information, implying all the information, was given to House of Commons administration. And I pursued this matter with Ms. Xavier, from CSE, and I asked her, was House of Commons administration informed that the source of the threat was APT 31? And she chose her words very carefully, and I didn't actually notice what she was doing until I read the testimony over afterwards. Because she said in response to one of my questions, Mr. Chair, as part of the various meetings and the reports that we provided, we were able to share with the House of Commons IT security staff what we believed at the time to be the originating source of the threat. But then I followed up and said, okay, so you shared with them that it was APT 31. And then at that point, she refused to answer. She said we should go in camera and various other points. So she said she shared what they thought was the source of the threat, but she never actually said that they shared that the source of the threat was APT 31. So there are big questions, and I think there's a little bit of sleight of hand being attempted by officials about what information was actually shared, especially with House of Commons administration.
For that, and while I completely agree with Mr. McKay that we need to look at solutions to ensure that what happened doesn't happen again, there does have to be some level of accountability. And to that end, the government has essentially washed its hands clean insofar as they have tried to place the blame squarely on House of Commons administration, and then when we begin to probe House of Commons administration, it seems to have fallen all on House of Commons IT, and yet 35 Government of Canada clients, including likely the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, were briefed in November of 2021. That's more than a year and a half before you were finally briefed, thanks to the FBI. So again, the notion that it should be left to IT services that was dealing with the technical matter of ensuring the integrity of IT systems in the House of Commons be left to them to inform members of Parliament seems to be completely untenable. Wouldn't you agree? And shouldn't there be some level of responsibility if, in fact, the PCO, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, were informed in November of 2021 and said nothing and did nothing for a year and a half and would not have done anything but for the FBI?
Mr. Cooper, unfortunately, that's all the time. So certainly in the next round, you're welcome to
get
raise that.
a simple answer.
Unfortunately, your preamble.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you're cutting me off on that important point.
I'm not cutting you off, sir. I'm simply applying the rules fairly. You will have another opportunity to ask questions to our colleagues. Mr. Romanado, the floor is yours.
Liberal chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And through you, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. And I'd like to actually start my... Mr. Speaker, can you please... I have the floor. If Mr. Cooper would like to please stop interrupting me, that would be... Well, you had your chance, Mr. Cooper. It is my time. Thank you. Colleagues, I want to premise this with... I firmly believe that you should have been made aware at the time. So I want to make sure that you understand I completely agree that what happened was inappropriate and you should have been made aware. What we're doing, we are trying to get to the bottom of what happened, and how we can make recommendations to make sure such a situation does not occur. I want to just get clarity from each of you on some specifics. Mr. Genius, you mentioned that it was your personal email that was attacked. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Was your parliamentary email as well, or just your personal?
I don't believe my parliamentary was. I think it was only the personal.
And on what date did you become aware of the fact that you were a victim of the cyber attack?
So it was earlier this year that I was informed by IPAC. We had a joint briefing, and as I remember the sort of sequence of events, Mr. McKay and I, who are co-chairs of the organization, heard the information first. We had a briefing with members of Parliament later that day. I was let know of the situation very shortly before, just in terms of convening those meetings that took place, but it was all within the space of a few days in late April of this year.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Bazan, which email account was used in the cyber attack in your case?
So based on the information that we received from IPAC and the IPAC briefing, then from the FBI, is that it was our P9s, most of us, and and I think that what we are told, although I've never had a conversation with IT Services, I've never had a conversation on this with Parliamentary Protective Services or the Sergeant at Arms, that IT was able to catch it in time. So firewall worked. However, you look at the case of Mr. Jennis, they were targeting his non-parliamentary account, and that is troubling. And so, in response to kind of what Michael said, but I'll just say this, that PPS, the Sergeant at Arms, and HOSCOM's IT Services all have a role to play in this, and to make sure that we are informed when these things happen.
I agree. So I'm going to go to Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay, was it your personal email or your parliamentary email, or both?
As far as I know.
Okay. And you learned at the end of April of this year. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. We've had we've had the CSE, we've had the House of Commons Administration, we've had CSIS come before this committee. And there seems to be, as you are, I'm sure, aware, Mr. Genius, a sort of, it's not our role to inform MPs. They all have a little box that they work in, and they don't actually, no one seems to know whose responsibility it is to actually inform MPs. So part of our study here is to put in place the proper protocols to make sure that in the event of another situation, and I understand that there was a directive, a ministerial directive issued to CSIS in May of 2023 to inform them that MPs must be made aware. Would you have any recommendations for this committee in terms of sort of, I don't want to say a workflow, but in the event of a situation such as this occurring again, who would you recommend be the appropriate channel to make sure MPs are notified immediately? Mr. Genius?
If I were attempting to write a protocol, I think, first of all, I pick up on Mr. Cooper's question that a lot of government authorities all seem to know, and we didn't. That's unacceptable. The other point I'd like to make is that we are not the government of Canada. We are the Parliament of Canada, and we sometimes confuse that. We do interact with government agencies, CSE in this particular instance, and so any protocols that should be written should be directed to the House of Commons authorities that look after our security. And I think that's where this committee should focus. And how you arrive at when and if and how, I think, is extremely difficult. And I would hope that the committee focuses its energy on that instead of sort of running around saying, well, everybody else knew but us. So
can I follow up on that? I really believe that our physical presence here and our physical protection is through Parliamentary Protection Services under the auspices of both the Sergeant at Arms and the RCMP. Ultimately, they should also be the ones that are responsible for protecting us from cyber attacks. So whether it's a physical attack or it's a non-physical attack, somebody has to take the lead here, and Parliamentary Protective Services are first and foremost responsible to make sure we're safe. That includes from online cyber attacks, deep fakes, AI, all these things that now are going to ramp up and become even more dangerous as we go forward as parliamentarians.
So I know I have very few minutes. Would you agree that, given the fact that the role that we play, we all have personal email accounts, right? We have for partisan purposes and so on. Would you recommend that some protocol be put in place in terms of also our personal email accounts, given the fact that we do have, all of us have those kind of accounts?
Just one witness in 10 seconds, please.
Well, I don't think House of Commons security can be everywhere that we are. We're on our personal emails. We're physically in other parts of the country, and I think that's where intelligence services have to be taking that macro view and saying, if there's information about a threat to you that may manifest itself on your personal account in your constituency when you travel, that they need to be informing you, having that broader view of security issues that goes much beyond just what happens in Parliament and with parliamentary devices.
Thanks very much, Ms. Romanado. Madame Gaudreau, la parole à vous pour 6 minutes.
You have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you know what APT 31 was doing and could do to you? Did you know what mechanism they were using?
To us is a pixel attack, which I have a description here because I'm not quite sure I still understand it. The emails you received were from the domain nropnews.com. There are various email addresses and names of fake journalists attached to this domain. The kind of attack is known as a pixel reconnaissance. It works by embedding a tracking pixel in a photograph or an image. When the receiver opens the email, the tracking pixel is able to send back some limited information to whoever sent the email. It's kind of like a phishing expedition with a PH phishing.
Et à quel moment vous avez eu cette information-là? Puis
And when did you get this information? And did you get this information?
Non?
Late April.
Fin avril.
I believe it was April 24th. Is when this was shared through IPAC to us as members of IPAC.
And if I can just add, I think the aside from the technical pieces, I think the key practical aspect of what Mr. McKay is describing is that this is the early stage of a likely broader attack. It's where an actor is trying to get some information which they would then use as part of subsequent attacks. We've now been briefed by the FBI on particular techniques that we can use to protect ourselves in the context of this escalation. This is why informing us is critically important. It's because when you know that you're potentially at the early stage of a reconnaissance attack, then you can actually put in place those mechanisms that can better protect yourself. We weren't told, so we weren't able to protect ourselves.
Moi, Monsieur le Président, là, ce qui me...
Mr. Chair, what really upsets me is that for months now we've been studying this. We've been asking questions. We want to, as for the CRS, as for CSIS, I found on their website, and we're going back to December 2021, a document on an operational campaign that was undertaken. In all honesty, I would have expected that the CSE would have provided us with some details as to the techniques used. And this was in the newspaper Le Monde. This article describes how APT 31 operates. And that's why it's important that we know when you found out and was it clear which techniques were used. And this was found with research that we can do ourselves. So the question I have for you is, what do you think right now of this? There could have been some way to rectify this problem on the part of CSE. Are you satisfied with the service that was is being provided to us right now?
right.
We wouldn't be here for a second.
Yeah.
I think we're all very disappointed, and I think CSE is a great organization. They are well respected within the Five Eyes, and I think when we talk about who's ultimately responsible, PPS is responsible for parliamentary protection, and they have a role to play in this. But definitely, CSIS and CSE, being the outward-looking agencies that are intelligence agencies and have the ability to handle cyber attacks, are the ones that have to make sure that those within the House of Commons are in the know. And again, it comes down to the sharing of information and how we classify it, and ensuring that the proper measures are taken so that we can take the corrective actions to protect ourselves. We are our own independent, parliamentary offices, right? But at the same time, we have a collective weakness, and that is our emails and our our online communications.
Donc, ce que je comprends, c'est que vous êtes.
So what I understand is that you agree that we are over-classifying things, and that our culture of information, well, we say, well, doesn't concern us. And finally, everyone's looking at us. And today, all the time we've put into this, just imagine the new technical things that are in place. So my question is, are you ready to review both parliamentary privilege and to what extent our privacy should be protected with respect to interference? Because now we talk about wanting to review everything. Do you really think we need to reform this, and do we have to ask ourselves more questions?
Let me just say, you've got 3 members of the Defense Committee here who all agree that we overclassify everything. That is that's a settled view on the Defense Committee, may I say. Having said that, yes, whenever those rules were written, it was way too late. They did not contemplate this kind of issue, and this committee would do a wonderful service to an update if you dealt with things like phishing attacks.
And just 10 seconds, I mean, sharing information is a critical way of fighting foreign interference. Telling people about these attacks is a big part. It's not the only way, and it doesn't work in every, but it's a critical part of how we fight back against these threats.
Merci, Madame Gaudreau. Ms. Matheson, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for appearing today. It's interesting to see us in this setup as opposed to in committee together differently. I wanted to go back to what you had said, Mr. McKay, in terms of the when, the if, the how. It's difficult. As we all know, I mean, the House of Commons, our emails are fairly semi-public at this stage. People crack the code all the time. So there are what would be millions of attacks daily upon the House of Commons. This particular APT 31, it was thwarted, and therefore it's been told to us that we were not informed, or you were not informed. But how, in your opinion, should we go forward in terms of that when, if, how, when there are so many? How would you expect the House of Commons to move forward in that with such incredible complexity and the sheer number of them?
If I had the answer to that, I would mail it in. I might even charge you for it. I think it is the critical issue that is in front of this committee. The how, I'm not quite sure, because the volume is immense. The level of threat is variable. And the trouble is the level of threat is not only variable from a national security standpoint, but for an individual parliamentarian standpoint. Because what I may perceive to be a threat to me, James or Garnet may think of it differently. So I wish I could answer your question.
Would it be more based upon then the one doing the phishing, the one doing that?
That's where that would be one of the things. You know, but even you say, well, it's a Chinese threat. Okay, well, that's one level of threat. An Iranian threat, That's another level of threat. Some guy in Moose Jaw in his basement, that's another level of threat.
Could be dangerous.
No disrespect to Moose Jaw.
And I think one of the ways to do it is I'm expecting, especially with the use of AI and how AI is going to be used to amplify and expand the number of cyber attacks that we all face. I think the one side of this is what's happening collectively, and then where we need to know is when it's very targeted. And that APT 31 was very targeted at 17 of us or 18 of us. And that, I think, is where you need to start saying, okay, you guys need to start watching your personal accounts. You need to be watching what you're doing on your iPhone, what you're doing in other apps, how your passwords are protected. Those types of pieces is where you start sharing with individual. But if it's just a broad-based attack that we're going after all the P9s and all AA1s and all our individual staff or all staff collectively, I think then we just leave it up to IT and CSE to thwart that. But when they're targeting us as individuals, if it's going after us on National Defense Committee, we should know.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I don't think it's that complicated at a level of principle to say that if there are general phishing attempts that are of the sort that target all accounts and come in on a regular basis, more or less sophisticated, that's in a different category from if you, Ms. Matheson, are being targeted by a particular foreign state as a result of them not liking a motion you put before House or committee, or I think that would be a case where you would want to know. You are being targeted by a particular actor as an individual for something you've done. Because that situation may require you to take particular additional steps to protect yourself that are different from what is required of other members of Parliament. So I think that should clearly flip a trigger that says there's a conversation that needs to happen between security agencies and you that's a bit different from what's being done generally with all members of Parliament.
At some point later in this Parliament, this committee will be studying the right to know legislation that's been proposed by Mr. Ruff, C-377. We've had many conversations about this in our Defense Committee as well, in terms of what level of security clearance certain members could have, should have, what have you. How important do you think that is? And as it relates to this conversation, how do members of Parliament navigate that in terms of what they do know, what they have access to in this greater risk threat environment?
It's about 1 minute remaining, witnesses.
So I support Mr. Ruff's bill completely. I think it's the right way to go to provide classifications to us, or whether it's secret, top secret, or higher, based upon what rules we have. We definitely have to go through the clearances that are required and background checks. I'm not expecting just a free-for-all that everybody, that as soon as you get elected, you get a top secret clearance. But, I do think that is the proper process. I think this is even a little bit more different, because I agree with Garnet that the more that we know about foreign interference, the more that we know about cyber attacks happening to us on the Hill here, share that with the public, we restore confidence in our democratic institutions. And one of the ways that we can handle this in a broader way, Mr. Chair, is that the House of Commons should be, or Parliament in general, should be issuing an annual report on the cyber attacks that we're facing and how they've been able to deal with it. And I think it's a way to provide some accountability and also a greater understanding of the evolving cybersecurity threat that we're in.
Thanks very much, Ms. Matheson. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To the members, do you accept the government's contention that this all fell on House of Commons administration and, as it turns out, House of Commons IT services to brief members of Parliament about this cyber attack of this nature?
I'll start, Chair. No, I don't, and I made, I think, 5 distinct points in my opening comments about why I don't. It was in my case a personal account. There are gaps in terms of what we know about what the House was even told. The government misunderstands the nature and expectations of IT professionals. The potential for caveats, and the fact that members of Parliament are not creatures of the House. We have rights on our own. And Mr. Cooper, just to follow up on your previous comments, we can talk about systemic failure, systems not doing the things we would expect of them. And then we could talk about individual accountability, people not making the choice to ensure the information got there. I think it's important to talk about systems, but also we can't miss the accountability piece that you've pointed out, which is that people had this information and made a choice not to take the steps necessary to get that information to those who were being targeted. I don't think we should use a discussion of systems to abstract from the fact that individuals in those systems made choices, and those choices led to members of parliament being more vulnerable to foreign threats.
I'm not quite so enthusiastic about blaming the government for everything. I think this is more of a failure of protocols. CSE apparently, as the FBI released the information to various governments, some governments had exactly the same protocol as Canada had, and other governments were much more detailed. I tend to think at this stage, 2 years on, that we should have those protocols needed to be changed. But, I don't want to take all the time so that you can get James in there.
I don't buy that argument that it's not just protocol. It's a culture, and it starts at the top, starts in the Prime Minister's office, and that this information has to be shared. The way they classify that information, the way they direct traffic, whether it's through CSE, CSIS, RCMP, Parliamentary Protective Services, the Speaker, how they share that information, that all starts with the yes or no that comes from the top in the PMO.
And I guess I'd push back a little bit on Mr. McKay insofar as the ministerial directive was issued in May of 2023 following the last question of privilege dealing with Mr. Chong. Following that ministerial directive, there was again a briefing to so-called relevant Government of Canada clients about the ATP 31 cyber attack. But again, no members of Parliament were briefed. So does that lend you any confidence in the ministerial directive and this government's approach to making members of Parliament informed?
Well, let me push back on the pushback, and say that the ministerial directives are helpful but late. And are they properly executed? I don't know. I would have hoped that once that ministerial directive was issued in 2023, that they might have reviewed their previous decisions, particularly with respect to us, and advised us, even if it was advised late. So hopefully, this committee will actually indicate that there is a need to not only change the culture here, but also the system here and the timeliness of the implementation of the change.
Sounds like Mr. McKay was agreeing instead of pushing back there.
I would like to think that we can spend a little bit more time actually dealing with solutions and analysis of the problems instead of just wasting our time blaming whoever should have been blamed. I'm perfectly prepared to accept that this was an error, and we should have been named. But
there's actually a pattern here, and it comes back to the national security.
Mr. Bazan, I am going to let you respond, but I'm going to give you a little bit of leeway if you wanted to reply.
Yeah, I'd just say that there is blame to go around here, and I think not only at the PMO but in the PCO with the National Security and Intelligence Advisor. What we saw under NSCOP, not sharing information, what we've seen in reporting, what we saw in Mr. Chong's case, and that testimony at the Hogue inquiry all point to the fact that the NSIA has not been sharing this information or saying it's not important, that especially when it comes to parliamentarians, the position has been in the culture is they don't need to know. Guess what? We need to know.
Okay,
so
Mr.
I don't know
McKay,
whether we're really disagreeing
I'm
here.
sorry. I've given some leniency here. Mr. Duguid, 5 minutes to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank my colleagues for appearing today. Mr. Chair, I'm not a veteran of this committee. I think I've been on since the session started in October. and about 2/3 of the time has been focused on motions of privilege related to foreign interference, and some very, very common themes. Lack of coordination, lack of communication, and of course, members of Parliament not being informed, which I think we all agree has been totally unacceptable. And the other observation I've made is that this has become a very partisan issue. And I was just struck by one of the things that Mr. McKay said, the longest-serving member of Parliament around this table, served with distinction for many years. I'm not buttering you up, don't worry. But you did say, I mean, we really have to get beyond partisanship on this particular issue. This is about our country. This is about the safety of members of Parliament. And Mr. McKay, you may have heard the NSICOP chair, who did a number of interviews yesterday, who lighted on this very theme. This is about the security of our country, the security of our decision makers. This is bigger than any MP, bigger than any party. His suggestion was that the leaders of the major parties in our Parliament have to get together in a room and have to put their heads together, have to down tools on the partisanship, and as we've been talking about today, come up with solutions, protocols, obviously take advantage of the Hogue Inquiry. I just wonder what your reflections are. I'd be interested in my other colleagues' reflections as well.
Far be it from me to disagree with Mr. McGuinty on anything, but I think he makes a valid point. I would add to the point, though, that don't just defer to the leadership. I mean, apparently we're all adults here. We need to take care of our own security, and I would be pretty upset if the leadership didn't take it seriously, but I'd be more upset that if we didn't take it seriously. So this is a serious committee. Ms. Masson asked a very difficult question. I thought that Mr. Bazan started to disaggregate the answer to that question a little bit better than Garnet or myself. And that is the hard work that needs to be done here, because this is going to keep on happening and keep on happening and keep on happening. And I honestly don't know where the protocols need to be drawn. And I dare say you want to put them in pencil or something that disappears, because they're going to change about a week after you actually land on them. So we need to take responsibility, and Mr. McGuinty's point is absolutely right. We need to take that.
Chair, I just add to that is that, you know, and to Mr. Duguid's point that, you know, yeah, there's definitely some of this that can be talked about, you know, at the caucus level, whether it's through party leaders or House leaders or whips, on the collective action. But there's still the individual privilege here as well, and then how we balance that off. And so, you know, it ultimately comes down to how we share information, the classification of that information with, you know, and when it comes down to cyber attacks, we're not talking about intelligence and how that intelligence is collected. We're actually talking about a kinetic cyber attack that has been documented and that is in the know, and some of it may have been shared through Five Eye partners, but the other Five Eye partners or other NATO allies, for that matter, have often taken action a lot quicker than us. And the APT-31 attack in particular, Sweden knew about it right away and shared it with those that were targeted almost immediately. And there's one other European country that shared that information very rapidly. So I think that is, I think, a key point, is that we don't have to rest on our laurels, look at what other countries are doing. We need to be aggressive now, and we need to make sure that what we're doing is proactive in making sure that each and every one of us are better prepared and protected.
Mr. Duguid, just a brief comment in response to what you said. I agree about the importance of finding solutions. I do respectfully, though, sometimes notice that the calls to go down tools on partisanship come immediately after a case of significant failure by the government. The government fails to do something they should have done, and then we say, whoa, let's go down tools on the partisanship. Be nice to us, right? Well, there needs to be solutions, but there also needs to be accountability for choices that were made.
Thank you very much, Mr. Duguid. Madame Gaudreau, 2 minutes, 30 secondes.
Ms. Gaudreau, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo what my colleague was saying. As a preventive measure, because we know the Uyghurs and all that, have you ever been contacted to report or to have you been warned that you should be careful? Have you ever received that type of message?
No, I am automatically careful. Domestically, though, I think we get a little more relaxed when we're at home. We think we're all right. I've had burner phones with me when I've been in Ukraine hacked. We take extra protocols when we travel to Europe. But Lindsay, John, and I were in Estonia last summer. We all had burner phones. We left our other phones and iPads and everything at home. I even went as far as, when we were coming up to the Russian border at Narva, that I shut off my phone, put it in my safety bag. I'd put it in airplane mode before I shut it off. We went to the border. We were filmed the whole time we were there by Russian border guards. When I got back in the bus and we were a good, 30 kilometers away from the border, I opened up the bag, my phone was on, and it was out of airplane mode and was hacked. Right. So, those types of attacks happen, and I think all of us have stories like that when we're traveling. And, I've had it happen when I was Parliamentary Secretary of Defense back in the day as well, on a good old BlackBerry. But, this is different, and this is happening right here at home, and so we have to be even more careful.
I had a similar experience in Ukraine where we just, you shut everything down. That's about the only thing you can do.
Il me reste quelques secondes.
I have a few seconds remaining. Do you believe that we are adequately equipped, technically speaking? We have our Five Eyes model. We heard about the Australian case, and we've been a little bit embarrassed that we haven't made the necessary changes since. Do you think that we're well equipped here in Canada?
Please.
That's a very difficult question, actually, and maybe not entirely relevant to this conversation. If I looked at it on a bigger picture, I think Canada is a very sophisticated nation as far as participation in the Five Eyes and various other cyber issues. On this issue, maybe not so much.
Merci, Madame Gaudreau. Ms. Matheson, 2.5 minutes.
Just to sort of continue on where we left off in terms of that conversation about security clearance that we should all be receiving. Mr. Jennis, I think you said we could talk about the systems and the failures, but there is a personal responsibility. Those that make those choices, these people that make those choices put other members at a greater risk. I am concerned, of course, about the larger context, the cloud that is now hanging over Parliament. A lot of parliamentarians have said this in relation to the NSICOP report and how we build those processes and systems in order to deal with those more difficult, well, they're all difficult questions, but this larger cloud that we are all worried about in terms of our privilege. But as you also said, culture starts at the top. How do you apply that to your own leader who will not receive a briefing so that he could potentially be part of the solution?
Well, I'm happy to answer that. The nature of the requirements that would be associated with receiving that briefing is that he could not use that information in any way to do anything. If a person is briefed and they are required as a condition of that briefing to tell no one, to action the information in no way, what possible action could be taken? In our party, and this law applies to every party, although I'm not sure it is being used. The Reform Act requires every caucus to take a vote at the beginning of Parliament on a mechanism whereby caucus members could be involved in the decision about caucus membership. So let's suppose that a leader becomes aware that there's a concern. They cannot bring that issue to their caucus. They can't bring that issue to the National Campaign Director. They can't bring it anywhere. So what we need is a process for accountability, not a secret briefing with the condition that you can do nothing with the information. It's not effective.
Interesting that you mentioned the Reform Act.
30 seconds.
one of the former directors of COMS, Mr. Stephen Harper, Corey Tenneke, said that the Reform Act, as it being used as an excuse, is a false construct. He said that getting the brief is an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, and I think that they should welcome it.
But he
very quickly from
I
one
think Corey is totally and completely wrong about that. And I mean, obviously, he can speak for himself in terms of his understanding of the Reform Act. The Reform Act is very clear about how caucuses make decisions. And I would only say I wish that the Liberal Party had followed the law with respect to the Reform Act and taken those votes at the beginning of Parliament. Because it's a concern if that law is not being followed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matheson. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of our first panel. I want to thank Mr. McKay, Mr. Genis, Mr. Bazan for joining us here today. We appreciate your time, gentlemen. We are going to briefly suspend to set up for the second panel, and we'll get going right away. We head into the second panel on the same topic. Would like to welcome the following members of Parliament, our colleagues who will be joining us for the second panel today. Mr. Kimich from Calgary Shepherd, Ms. Stephanie Cusey from Calgary Midnapore, and the Honourable Judy Scrow, the Member of Parliament from Humber River Black Creek. Colleagues, you will each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement, and then we will head into a round of questioning no different than in any other committee setting. Witnesses, have you had an opportunity to discuss who may like to go first, or does someone just want to put their hand up?
No, it's going in the order of the meeting. Yeah, for sure. That's how it should go. It should go as is in the order in the notice of meeting, and I believe that's...
It can go in a variety of different ways, but Mr. Kimich,
I think it's always good to follow the
if you would like to go,
notice.
Mr. Kimich, you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
That's fine, though. Thank you.
Thank you. I was trying to be a gentleman. So I've had the opportunity now to listen to the testimony that was given this morning in the first panel. I don't have speaking notes handed to the interpreters, so I'll speak slowly and I'll pause and I'll switch to French. I was going to say, so I'm just going to repeat what I said in the House of Commons. I believe that the government in Canada had a moral and ethical responsibility to tell the 18 parliamentarians, including myself, I'm one of them, I'm a member of IPAC, that we had been targeted by a PRC special unit for a form of digital surveillance. And the government of Canada failed in its moral and ethical responsibility to tell us. I have 6 points I wanted to make based on testimony I heard, so I just want to refer to it. The first part was during the CSE's testimony here. They said that they had become aware January to April 2021, more than a year earlier, they're talking about June 2022, about a report, that the Cyber Center had already shared reports with the House of Commons IT security officials, specifically detailing a serious matter of technical indicators of compromise by a sophisticated actor affecting House of Commons IT system. Based on a testimony I had to assume is APT 31. I had no idea that this was going on at the time, and I also did not know what APT 31 was until I was told on April 24th by IPAC from my two co-chairs and the executive director of IPAC that I had been one of the targets of this PRC campaign. Since then, I have not had any type of contact directly from CSE or CSIS. I have heard, though, from the FBI, so I had the same May 9th FBI briefing that other members received detailing exactly what APT 31 was. Later in testimony provided before the committee by CSE, Caroline Xavier said, I can confirm that when we became aware in 2021 of some anomalies, it's interesting she calls them anomalies, we were seeing with regard to potential cyber activities towards the House of Commons, we did indeed inform the House of Commons IT security team. She goes on then to detail, we did indeed share that list of parliamentarians with the House of Commons IT security team, as well as we shared it with CSIS. Now, my staff, when I became aware I had been targeted, I asked on April 25th, they responded back to me with a citation, and here it is. It was copy-pasted by the Sergeant at Arms. For your records, we have been involved in an investigation of this activity while it was ongoing, well before it was publicly disclosed. My staff followed up and asked the question, are you saying that the Sergeant at Arms office was aware and investigated this activity before, or are you referring to the House IT administration? The office of the Sergeant at Arms, SAA, was not aware of this investigation. However, the HOC Cybersecurity Team Information Service IT administration stated that they were involved in this investigation while it was ongoing. I want to draw your attention to another piece of testimony and questioning by Mr. Jennis. In that, Madame Caroline Xavier said, as part of those actions, we provided 12 reports to the House of Commons. This would have been since January 2021. Again, not aware of the contents of those reports. I don't have the benefit of the in-camera sessions that the members of this committee received. So I am at a disadvantage. Et maintenant, je vais tourner en français. Donc, juste pour que les interprètes se préparent.
So I'll be turning to French now. In the Q&A period, with respect to Ms. Xavier and Ms. Gaudreau, yes, we did set up for members of Parliament an opportunity to receive support when there are cyber security incidents. It's very important that they contact us if they want our assistance. It's impossible to connect with cybersecurity or the CSE. It's the first time that there is such a service for parliamentarians that's been in existence since 2019. I've been here since 2015. It's the first time I hear about it, and it's impossible to ask for assistance from a cyber center anywhere in the government if we don't know that we've been targeted by a foreign agency from a foreign intelligence service.
In cross-examination and following up on questions asked by Ms. Matheson, Mr. Jennis raised the point that the CAC made the following observation, that in different rounds of questions, that government institutions need to respect parliamentarians in the House of Commons. It's hard to feel respected by CSIS or CSC or the House of Commons IT Cybersecurity Administration when they don't bother to tell us that we are the targets of foreign campaigns. They don't bother to tell us that we're targeted by foreign agencies. I do a significant amount of work in diaspora communities amongst Canadians who are here. I have people who often tell me they cannot be seen in a picture of me that will be posted online, so they jump out of pictures. Finally, in my office, I also have a Ukrainian flag signed by many of our UCC interns in past years, so I am sure the Russian Federation and its officials don't like it. And lastly, I have protest pictures from Hong Kong brought to me by Albertans who were there. And those are often pictures of Hong Kongers who come and visit me. Do not take pictures in front of that with me in it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. Ms. Cusi for 5 minutes.
Good morning, colleagues. Bonjour, chers collègues.
Good morning, colleagues.
Of Thursday, April 25th of this year, I received an urgent message from my colleague indicating the necessity of a call as soon as possible. I was not alone on the thread, and so the call was set for later that afternoon. The contents once shared were disturbing. Those present on the call had been the target of a cyber attack by APT31, a hacker group set up by the PRC. To receive this news is unsettling, to say the least. You immediately think of your most intimate transactions. It's impossible not to. And your thinking regresses backwards and quickly through all communications. It's no secret our electronic communications confer the most precious details of our lives: where we are, who we're with, and what we're doing. One comes to Jesus quite quickly in these moments, which is rapidly followed by the crushing resentment of how did this happen and why. I've never taken my stations for granted as a member of Parliament and former diplomat for Canada. I've recorded in thorough detail with the authorities in the past relationships where I questioned the motivation of those forming a bond with me. My triggers were always lavish gifts, suspicious backgrounds, and a forced effort to create a closeness. In 2021, after changing residences, I requested a sweep of my home for bugs. I was informed by the authorities that these services were not available for those outside of the executive of government. I had a security assessment done in my home and the recommended security system installed, to the remark of a colleague who indicated that they could see who killed you after you were dead. Do I desire the 24-hour protection of some of my colleagues? I'm very nervous about reaching that level of notoriety. Yes, I've been stopped both in the vitamin aisle and in the deli section by those who recognize me, but this is, of course, another level. The most disturbing aspect of this is having been informed by not even a second but third hand. So I'm very grateful to have had run into Luc de Pulford at the inauguration of the Taiwanese president in Taiwan, and to have thanked him personally for his intelligence and sharing with us. Despite our differences, I've also always had an affection for the United States, having done both my master's degree and having served as the Canadian consul to Dallas from 2010 to 2013. So I'm not surprised it was actually the Federal Bureau of Investigation that surmised this breach and informed IPAC, who then informed my colleague, who then informed me. This does, however, not dismiss the pervasive and persistent disappointment I have in being informed, not directly by the Canadian government. As a consul, I felt a keen guardianship for all Canadians in my host region. I wish the Canadian authorities reflected the same sentiments in having informed me about my violators. I can only deduce that they did not. My sense of disappointment is overwhelming. The fear that consumes you when you think about the possible effects on you, your family. You try to push them out of your head, like a tooth your dentist says that needs to be pulled at a later date. As a legislator, you consider what needs to be done to protect you and those around you, as well as your colleagues. You take this path knowing a part of your life is not your own, but this validates it in a manner far vast than you would like to consider. In closing, I believe in evil, and not just in the biblical sense. I believe in malice in the hearts of men, those who wish to intentionally inflict harm upon others. One need only refer to Navalny or the 37 murders in La República de Mexico in the most recent elections. I'm not talking about someone saying I'm hot or not online. I have thicker skin than that. But the potential for real harm to me or for my loved ones. This attack appears on the surface to have been minimal in impact, but it indicates a far greater concern that someone is watching. They want to know what I'm doing, who I'm meeting, and where I will be. Evil, when confronted, will always try to realign, but the tactics are always the same. Divide, conquer, intimidate, extort. These micro acts of regression are the genesis of the foundation of intelligence gathering. The reality is that what you don't know can hurt you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sgro for 5 minutes.
Well, I won't take 5 minutes. Thank you very much for hosting this study. And I'm grateful for you doing it because it's the first time I've talked to anybody about this issue. All right, this is 2 months later. And that's unacceptable for sure. Going back, I was furious. I was livid when I got the call from IPAC. We had a joint conversation, as my colleagues have already indicated. The anger left, but then I was left with a huge disappointment, as my colleagues have said. This is not what I would have expected. But more importantly, it happened. The firewall held, and because of that, they felt there was no reason to tell us. Well, I want to know. Many of us on this panel, all of us, do a lot of human rights work, and we take on some pretty hot topics in the House of Commons and outside the House of Commons. And I think the intent of a lot of this is to intimidate all of us so that we will stop standing up on behalf of people who don't have a voice. And I think that's a big, important part of our job. It's just not to represent our local constituents. It's also to be a voice for those who are voiceless. It's because of members of parliament that some of the progress we are seeing in different files is happening, whether it's the Tibet file or the Iranian one, or the Taiwan, of course. It's because members of parliament had the courage to stand up and be counted. So, yes, they did this, and we didn't get notified, so let's move on. Okay, what do we learn from this? So I think I always try to figure out what good comes out of a negative situation, right? My anger is gone. My disappointment is still there. My hope that we are going to use this as an opportunity to put down the when, hows, and wheres, that all of us become much more aware of the threat that we could be under, take more responsibility ourselves to making sure that we are protecting our systems. I'm told turn them off once a week. That helps to eliminate any viruses or anyone who's trying to access it. That's a very simple thing. No one's ever told me that in the many years I've been here. But we need to get serious. We need to, with your help, we need to put a plan in place. I mean, I didn't even know who to ask of any other damage that might have been. I had no idea after all the years I've been here. I mean, I know the Sergeant of Arms is there, but I had no idea where to go, where to ask, how to better protect myself. And I think those are things we have been until now extremely naive, but based on recent conversation with CSIS and others that I asked for, and the AI that can clearly reproduce me at another meeting a half an hour from now that I'm not even at, but it could look exactly like me with this AI business going on. So I think we are in much more threat now than we've ever been previously, and we need to figure out how to do that. How are we going to protect each other, and what's the role, and who puts what into place? And it needs to be more public. I think our liaison committee should also report once a year at minimum, along with all the other reports. How many cybersecurity issues have there been? That kind of issue, we need to become more knowledgeable. And so you have the role of coming up with those suggestions, but I think there needs to be much more emphasis put on for parliamentarians to be respected, as my colleague mentioned, and think that we're not dispensable, so we won't bother to tell you that there has been this on social media attacking you. If you don't know yourself, they're not going to tell you. Well, their job is to make sure we are protected. And when we talk about trying to get more people to run for public office, well, if they're going to run for public office, we have at least the responsibility to make sure they have all the tools necessary to be protected so that we can do the jobs that we all want to be doing here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sgro. Colleagues, we will now enter our first round of questioning. Mr. Duncan, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I'll build on what you've said in your intros in the first hour with the our other colleagues that were here. Maybe just to lay the groundwork here a little bit in the aftermath of you becoming aware and becoming public knowledge of this threat and what happened, or frankly, what didn't happen in terms of you being notified. Have either of you three, any of you three on this panel, had any conversations or exchanges since this came to light with PCO, the Prime Minister's office, the Minister of Public Safety, or the department about exactly what happened, or perhaps, and did they ask for your feedback or suggestions on how this situation can be avoided in the future? I'll just ask you to answer that if you have been in contact with any of those aforementioned groups or departments.
No, I have not.
No? Excuse me.
I have not, but it stems from the place as having been the former Shadow Minister for Democratic Institutions, where from that time, I fundamentally believe the government wasn't acting enough on foreign interference, which I believe is inextricably tied with our protection in cybersecurity as parliamentarians. And that's after at least 6 interactions with myself and the former Minister of Democratic Institutions, as well as speeches that I gave in the House. So my point as well, the Toothless Digital Charter, that was another sort of sticking point for me of 2019. So no, but I think it's because if nothing has been done till now, it felt pointless to me.
No contact whatsoever. The only people who reached out was the FBI on a May 9th briefing.
Where I want to go with this is that there's a protocol problem clearly, but I think the bigger issue that's here is a culture problem. There are protocols in place right now that officials thought would inform parliamentarians, and that's not happened. There's a bigger issue here of a culture that comes from the PCO, PMO, in different agencies that just frankly I felt were careless in assuming somebody else would look after it, not do proper follow-up. So maybe I want to ask each of you about your comments on the culture that's out there, just of not doing that follow-up, not making sure that people that are actually being threatened are being informed in a timely manner, provided the proper resources and so forth, and then maybe in your response talk about what needs to change then. Who is responsible? And the disappointment, for example, Ms. Sgro, you mentioned that you still have. Who's that disappointment with in that, in terms of where the responsibility lies? Mr. Kimmich.
So, Chair, my response to that would be to repeat something Judy said. I believe that the government sees us as disposable because we're members of parliament. We come and go, which is the way our system is supposed to work. And especially for us backbenchers, I think there is this culture in the agencies and government in general that because we're temporary, we're temps, to use a term that I sometimes read in my ATIPs from civil servants, because they know we'll leave, that we're infinitely disposable. I think the government had a moral and ethical responsibility to tell us, go straight to the top. soon as they knew. Just tell us. That's the answer. I can take care of myself. I can then go and ask CSE for the Cybersecurity Center help. I can then go ask the Sergeant at Arms for help. Like, I kind of know what I can do, but if I'm not told, I can't do anything if I don't know.
Sure. I think it's a coordinated naivety between all authorities. Historically, we've moved into another era. I'd say even more recently. I'd even say on a weekly or monthly basis. But I fundamentally feel, and I'm sure I'll be challenged on this, that it's on an indifference by the current administration, and this indifference leads to incompetence in the rank and file. That's of those who are in charge of our safety. I fundamentally believe this.
Ms. Rowe?
I think for many years we have all been naive, whether we're parliamentarians or we are people who work in a whole lot of different areas. Canada is just waking up to issues of foreign interference and all the rest of it. This is a new era. And I think everybody's been naive, not realizing. I don't think anybody intentionally held anything back that they thought would hurt us. The firewall held. Hallelujah. We're supposed to be really happy. The firewall held when we had this APT-31 attack, right? That's what I was told. So we should be glad. Well, I am glad that it held. And I am glad that we're here because we're going to find a way to better protect parliamentarians and Canadians as we move forward as a result of this.
And where I'll go with that, the culture of secrecy and I think disrespect of parliamentarians is that since actually other questions of privilege and other issues started to come to light, multiple directives were issued to actually improve the process and say parliamentarians must be informed. And even after those directives were issued, parliamentarians still weren't informed. So my point about the culture is that protocol, that directive was given to improve the process and literally ignored, and every excuse in the book as to why not. So the culture, maybe, Ms. Groh, just to talk about that, it's new, maybe we've been naive, but to me, it's the culture of actually taking any protocol or directive seriously and improving that. We've seen examples of that said, but not followed through on. So anyone that has comments on that would be appreciated.
One witness, very quickly, please.
Just to add, after the, when we had our discussion with the FBI and with IPAC, and we challenged why were we not told? We were told that the way the system is, the FBI had to report to one particular person within the Government of Canada. They could not come directly to us. After that, several weeks after that, the FBI actually had a briefing with all of us. But they said that there was a system in place that the FBI could not directly inform us. It had to go through a bit of a protocol that was in place that nobody seemed to follow.
Thanks very much, Mr. Duncan. Ms. Romanado for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'd like to thank my colleagues for being here. And I'll premise this the way I did with the last panel, that I firmly believe all of you should have been told. And it's very unfortunate that you weren't. So I want to pick up on that. Mr. Kimmich, you mentioned that you've had meetings with the FBI, I think it was on May 9th, but you mentioned you have not met with CSIS or CSE. Have you met with anyone since this has come out? Has anyone from, whether it be CSE, House of Commons, IT, or CSIS sat down with you?
No.
Okay. Ms. Kuzi, in your case, has anyone met with you?
No. Yeah, I'll just leave it. I'll leave it there, Ms. Ramananda. No.
Ms. Groh?
This is at my request.
Okay, so you actually had to request the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So there appears there's obviously the protocol is not working. The fact that you had to proactively reach out yourself is an issue. When CSIS was here and CSE was here, I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding about what actually MPs do. I'm not an intelligence officer. I would not know what they do. But there really is a disconnect, I think. They don't realize, as you said, Ms. Groh, the work that we do puts us more at risk in terms of interest from other, whether it be state actors or non-state actors. And we never want MPs to change what they're doing. We want you to continue to do what you're doing because it is important work, whether it be here in Canada or abroad or standing up for human rights. What would you recommend that this committee put forward in terms of making sure that intelligence agencies and those who are asked to protect us, whether it be physically or in the virtual world, what would you recommend that we recommend to them to make sure they understand what we do and how we do it? Would you have recommendations for us and any of the witnesses?
Chair, I'll go ahead and give that a shot. I would say the first thing is these agencies need to have a positive requirement on them to inform parliamentarians, because what I don't want to see is what now I've experienced, where even HOC cybersecurity says, and our Sergeant at Arms' office says that the HOC cybersecurity knew, but Sergeant at Arms' office didn't know. Then they come here and everybody says someone else was told to tell someone. And it's unclear to me, again, you have the in-camera discussions that were had. I note that CSC kept saying, well, in camera, they could answer some of those questions. I need to know. I need to know whether I'm a target, and it will change the way I do my work because it's already had an impact on my work. Because when I have people reach out to me that want to meet with me, if you Google my name, this is one of the things that will come up. So some people, dissidents, journalists in exile, will self-censor. They will not reach out to us because they may say, if I email him, if I contact him on his social media, that might be tapped. That might already be compromised by a foreign agency because there is public information showing that these foreign agencies have an interest in me for the work that we all do here. And because of that, it's already had an impact on the work that I can do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that's a really good point, because what we're looking at is not only the question of privilege, but also the question of who's responsible for making sure MPs know. And throughout the studies, we have not had a clear indication. Everyone, as you said, says, oh, it's their responsibility, it's their responsibility. And so we want to correct that, obviously. But you've also mentioned something about how it's changed the way you do the work that you do. And that is very concerning to me. Now, the reality is every single one of us has different roles that we play, backgrounds and so on. So in certain ways, we're all targets for different state and non-state actors. In terms of the protocol, we have a ministerial directive that I understand from the last meeting is only been directed to CSIS, not to CSE and not to the House of Commons IT. Would you recommend that that ministerial directive be elaborated? Ms. Groh?
Absolutely. If that's what's necessary. I mean, you would think it wouldn't have to be necessary, but it appears that it needs to be a ministerial directive. So then start with that. They have to have that directive. They have to share the information with parliamentarians. I think it's hard to believe that all of the folks that are involved in protecting us don't know, to Mr. Kmich's issue, what we're really doing. That we are dealing with a lot of foreign issues and all these other things. Is it possible they don't know the extent that many of us are venturing into areas that seem to be areas that upset China and Iran and so on and so forth? I can't believe they're not aware of it, but if they are, then maybe they should spend some time with parliamentarians or watch what goes on in the House of Commons a little bit. Maybe it would change things.
I only have 15 seconds, and again, I want to thank you for coming forward today and giving us any feedback that you have, because we do have to fix this. Thank you.
Merci. Madame Gaudreau, à vous pour 6 minutes.
Ms. Gaudreau, 6 minutes. Mr. Chair, today, in all honesty, I can see that this is a meeting that is most relevant. We're talking about the problem and not just simply being partisan. I'd like to go back to what you experienced, and I heard when you said we have to take charge. We have to take matters in hand upstream. One day there will probably be another government. Is it normal that there shouldn't be any confidence? Because when you met with the CSE, I raised my hand and I said, well, given that I am not your client, you're dealing with a government, I want to be your client. I'd like to hear what you have to say on that. What do you think that we should get this out? Because this is part of our life. We live this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What do you think of that? In my part, we have to really do a complete evaluation of the system. We have to better inform parliamentarians, MPs of these problems, because right now there seems to be a complete lack of a system to analyze the threats, not only to the system per se, but that also includes the threat for each and every MP, because the threats to MPs are there given the activities that MPs are involved in. And as I said, it's really important to be transparent, and you have to provide information. Information is very important for the MP. So in my opinion, I think we need a complete review of the system with better transparency and a better assessment of the threat. Perhaps I missed something you said in your opening statement. Do you think that the attacks, were they against your personal account? Mr. Chair, I was going to say in my case it was on my public account that I use, but I have 3 email addresses because I can open them at any time. No one has told me whether I could open these emails. So I printed them off, and that's what I have to do, because from what I know, this digital surveillance attack works with photos. Look at the pixels that are in that. I did a Google search, and everything's described. In my opinion, it's in my public address, in my personal writing office, and in my HAL office. So each of these computers could have been affected because of the lack of information that I was given. Pardon me.
House of Commons.
Okay.
Account altogether. But can I just take it somewhere else, that following on the earlier one of what can we do? You know, this is June, and we're learning a whole lot. I would hope that when the House comes back in September, that there is a very significant presentation on security issues to all parliamentarians, and one that we would start the session with.
Je vous arrête parce que mon temps est...
I'm going to interrupt you because I have limited time. Moreover, I don't know as far as you're concerned, but we did get a CSIS briefing at our caucus, and it's becoming a necessity. I'm very concerned with prevention. So your parliamentary account, and as far as you're concerned, I have 3 accounts. The first one is stephaniekuzi.parle.gc, and I have a Gmail account. So, but for me, it's a window. It's a window that they're looking for, and that's what really disturbs me. I have one other question, because earlier I was explaining my concern. How is it that I have no qualification with spying or anything, but I did some research on the web back in 2021, and they talked about the campaign that was used by APT 31, and we can read some newspaper articles about that. Once again, on May 12th, there's a description of what was occurring. What the CSC visit never told us anything about that. That being said, and I'll conclude with this, there are some members, and this is written in Le Monde newspaper, some MPs talked about their intention of filing a legal complaint because this MP experienced exactly what you experienced. So in your situation, how do you feel about it? Are you angry enough to do this to make matters move? In 30 seconds, I wasn't angry when I found out that I'd been targeted by a foreign agency for this type of attack. I was disappointed that my government didn't think that it was worthwhile protecting me or telling me. Thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all three of you as well for joining us today and sharing this experience with us. I kind of wanted to, in the last panel, in the last round, I was talking about the fact that there are millions of hits that this institution, parliamentarians overall would get. I'm a little concerned, and I worry when CSIS and CSCs were here, they talked about the fact that they regularly, and I think the House of Commons administration said, they regularly provide parliamentarians with general warnings, and that they thought that was enough in terms of that understanding of what foreign interference or a cyber attack would be. We also talked about personal responsibility, what that means to the individual MP. We just talked about the fact that we were briefed by CSIS this week at caucuses, but Ms. Groh, you were talking about the need for those briefings. What do you want to see far beyond that general? I know that it would probably be overwhelming for members of Parliament if they were briefed on every single attack that was put forward, but what do you see those briefings to look like? Would it be a quarterly thing? Because that information changes so quickly? Just give me an idea of what you're thinking on that.
Well, I think we have to stop not talking about it, and we have to start learning more about it and how many threats there are. Again, it depends on the category of threat that is there as well. But there needs to be more knowledge shared. And things are moving so quickly that even if we had a briefing a year ago or 6 months ago, by the fall, things have moved again very, very quickly, and we have to make sure that we are staying on top of it. We're all busy. I don't even look at the social media, all right? I don't go on it. I don't care what they say. Yeah. Let them do what they want because I'm going to do what I need to do. But, when the category of threat reaches a certain point, I rely on somebody getting in touch with me and saying, well, what you said last week has generated this particular threat. Just let me know, and I will handle it accordingly. But I think it needs to be frequent. I don't think this once a year or once every 3 years at the beginning of a new parliament, that's not enough with the way things are moving so quickly.
I've had the pleasure of visiting the majority of threatened democracies in the world, except Ukraine. That's the one that stands out. But when I was in South Korea, they have a digital map of cyber threats in real time, and in this day and age, I don't see why we can't be informed on it with a daily report or even an attack report. With the technology is there, in my opinion, that we are able to intercept or to view and intercept the attacks, and I believe that we should be receiving far more information because the technology is there, and I think we have a right to know. And as I said, those of us who are more involved in pro-democratic, pro-human rights activities will certainly have more, but I think the government has the responsibility to protect us in doing that work.
Chair, thank you for the question. My view is that these generic briefings that we receive or the emails that tell us not to open an obvious phishing scam by email, there's that phishing absonnage button. I have never used that button in like 20 years of using Outlook, so I can't tell you what it does. I just know not to open the email. It's obvious to me. But I know my colleagues here. I know that Ms. Cusey is very involved with Cuban exiles who are fighting for freedom in Cuba. I know that Ms. Groh shares my interest in a free Iran, and she leads one of the different parliamentary groups. When there are specific attacks on us by foreign governments or foreign groups, we should be told in the moment. instead of getting like these generic quarterly briefs or as they happen that there's a phishing attack on Parliament Hill into our emails. That's not useful. I will praise one group, the Parle Voyage people who give us the burner phones and inform us what to do, the security level threats. When I traveled to Iraq last year with a parliamentary delegation, they were excellent. They told us exactly what was reasonable, what was unreasonable, and how to be digitally secure as you're traveling through different airports. But outside of that, like I said, nobody's come talk to me from CSIS, CSC, or any of the other alphabet soup agencies, except for the FBI, to tell me and explain to me what I could do to be safer and like actual technical usable things.
Thank you. Ms. Carr, I wanted to
1 minute,
focus
Ms.
too
Matson.
and thank you for being a former co-chair or a chair for the Taiwan Canada Friendship Group and all the work on that. I traveled to Taiwan as well, and so we heard from their perspective in terms of what they deal with, millions of hits by China every day as well. They put forward a minister. They have a specific minister of digital affairs. Is that something that Canada should replicate, or do you have other ideas in your many trips and learning from them where we could go?
I found it fascinating to see the thousands and thousands of hits they get on disinformation every single day. So, they have 4 people whose job, that's all they do. 24 hours a day is monitor the system and put out corrections to the disinformation that is being fed into the networks that are out there. And so I think we've got a lot to learn from them in that particular area, whether they're dispelling disinformation. But I think cybersecurity, the whole thing needs to be much more seriously taken as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matheson. Mr. Calkins, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to differentiate because I think there's been attempts to conflate so many attacks with the instance that's happened in this particular case. We're dealing here with actual phishing. This is a different thing altogether. This is not a denial of service attack. This is not a cyber attack. A phishing attack is a personal attack because the vulnerability is actually at the human level. I'm fully convinced that our technical experts, because I actually did IT work in a previous life, I'm so outdated now that I wouldn't know some of the new things that they're doing. But the difference here is it involves a human being making an error. That's how they do it. Because we can actually thwart most of the cyber stuff. We can thwart denial of service attacks. We can thwart all of these things that actually attack the technology. But this is an attack that requires the vulnerability is one of us clicking on something that we hadn't ought to be clicking on. And, the difference in this particular case is it was serious enough. It's not just somebody looking to try and scam us out of some money. It's not the Nigerian prince type of question. This is actually serious enough because it's from a hostile state foreign actor or considered a hostile potential hostile foreign actor, directly targeting one of us, a group of us, 18 of our colleagues, with this attack. And I think the frustrating part for me is our job, our primary responsibility. We're not in the sausage grinding of government. We're not. We're actually, we're actually very, very nimble people, much more nimble than Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And if we're going to be able to do our jobs, we need to know what's going on. And if we're not informed, and I think it's embarrassing for our country that 18 parliamentarians found out basically because the FBI released this. Because it is different. It's different than a cyber attack. It's different than all the other random stuff that our emails might get hit with. This is hostile activity meant to do something subversive or damaging to individual members of Parliament and thereby the entire institution and our democracy at the root level. So if we're not told about something this specific, the FBI thought it was important enough.
they seem to be able to sort it out of cyber attacks and denial of service attacks and other infrastructure attacks and other just random phishing or malware attacks. Why can't Canada do this? And how are we supposed to keep and hold our government to account if we don't actually even know that something is happening? And I guess I'm looking to you three to say something that would give this committee some direction as to what do you think would have been specifically, to the best of your knowledge, a more appropriate way for you to find out, a more appropriate timeline for you to find out. Because we can't fix, like, the only reason we're talking about this is because
Calkins,
somebody else tipped us off.
Just to let you know, we've got about 90 seconds left to the witnesses.
And I'll just leave it at that. And I know it's a very open-ended general question, but
Well, if IPAC hadn't told us, we wouldn't know today. So, you know, it took that organization that has nothing to do with Canada to reach out to us and let us know, or we wouldn't know. And so, again, I go back to the disappointment that we need to know. Parliamentarians need to know when there's been a threat leveled against us. We need to know. And that doesn't mean 6 months from now. If I got a threat today, based on what I said yesterday, I wouldn't even know where to go. I mean, I know I'm going to go to Sergeant of Arms, but then what? Like, we need to know, what do we do when we receive something that we think is a serious threat, what to do, what not to do, and where to go.
Chair, thank you for the question. I was going to add that the government of Canada needs to treat our digital security like the House of Commons treats our physical security. I feel safe around the parliamentary precinct because I know there's enough PPS officers around who are actively managing the security of the area. And on digital security, like, I'm sure they can shut down our emails and then keep our files safe, whatever device that they're on. But when CSC found out that this was APT 31, these aren't basement goons. These are men and women who there was a $10 million reward by the U.S. State Department for information leading to their arrests. This is like an active foreign intelligence unit that was used. So as soon as that was found out, there should be a positive responsibility on CSIS, CSC, and all the alphabet soup agencies to don't send me an email, call my office, contact me directly, tell me that I'm a target, and tell me why I'm a target, if they know. Because I would like to know. The phishing stuff, I entirely agree with you that that's everything we go through that, people go through that in private life and businesses, but being targeted by foreign intelligence service is new.
Thanks very much. Mr. Hardy, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the information that we've had this morning. NSICOP, of course, came down with a report. And evidently, as we've learned, some people are named in that report as based on intelligence that surfaced during a variety of work done by our agencies. I want to pull it back to the issue of privilege. There's been a lot said about, should we divulge the names of those people to the world? Should we perhaps think about ways of divulging the names of those people to those people? Is that a question of privilege? I'm just asking for an opinion here. You don't have to be, encyclopedic or well-read on the whole issue, but what do you think? We'll start with you, Ms. Guzzi.
Absolutely. I think that's the first step. I would not. I think that they should be divulged to the world as the position of my party and my leader as well. But it absolutely should be divulged to them, and I know I constantly do.
Okay,
an
we'll ask for a fairly
Yep.
short answer
Sure.
because I have other questions.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Sgro?
I think they should know that they are named in a report of concern, but certainly they should not be publicly released. How could you go throw out anybody's name? There a lot of innuendo in that report and so on and so forth, but there's no proof, lots of possible intelligence and all of that, but you could not turn around and throw out Ken Hardy's name being in that report as a possible person who's working contrary to Canada.
I'll have something to say on that one in a second. Mr. Kimmich?
Chair, thank you for the question. Chair from the Canada-China Committee, I'm glad to see you here. I was going to draw your attention to page 66 of the NSICOP report, engagement with parliamentarians. So to answer your question in brief, I just want to quote this part after, is to say, yes, those names should be released. It says here, paragraph 162, it did so because parliamentarians are often at the center of interference activities by foreign states. While the committee recognizes that CSIS has provided briefings to some members of parliament, a comprehensive briefing strategy covering all parliamentarians was not implemented despite PCO seeking the Prime Minister's approval on 2 occasions. It goes straight to the top.
Right. There's some character running around Surrey right now who's identified as a proxy for India, telling everybody, including the reporter that I spoke to over last weekend, that he and I are just like this. And that's not the case. I wouldn't doubt that my name is in that report just based on that, right? So I would deserve to know, even if it's just private, because I think it's a matter of privilege. Mr. Comich, I have to compliment you on the work that you have done on the Canada-China Committee. You've been in the thick of a lot of very, very interesting, testimony and commentary. We know that China's very persistent. They play the long game. And I'm just concerned that, okay, APT 31 is one thing, but what about the cumulative effect of APT 31 on top of what the United Front does, on top of all of these other things? You care to sort of, gather all of that and comment on what actually we should be looking at here?
So, Chair, thank you for the question. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I agree in general. There are many different APTs out there, as I've discovered with my staff. When you do a search of it, there's actually multiple units. This is the thin wedge of the sword that the PRC wields. As you know, Chair, there's a lot more of these types of activities we expect into the future, of entire campaigns that will be led against Western democracies and against legislators, because in many cases, legislators are seen as the weak point in the government because you don't have the help of the agencies typically. That was the case, I'll mention, I'll draw your attention to the statement made by Belgian legislators who said that they equally were not told by their government that they had been targets of APT 31. And in their case, they said there was a direct attack on their democracy and on their parliament for their government not having told them, and they expect other attacks by PRC entities and agencies. I will say that since 2012, when Xi Jinping took over, the United Front Works Department has basically become a state security apparatus that operates in all Western democracies, and we should be paying serious attention to all of their sub-entities like these APT 31 type groups.
That's about it, Mr. Hardy. Thank you. Madame Gaudreau, 2 minutes 30 seconds.
2.5 minutes, Ms. Gaudreau. Mr. Chair, I see that what I found here, which comes from the French Republic Center. So during our meeting, we were expecting to hear about details, and I can tell you, go and look at this. There's this whole chain of infection, and this goes back to 2021. All of the intrusion vectors, the invasion methods used, the victimization involved, the infrastructure. It's all described here. The equipment that's being targeted, everything has been there since 2021, and it's accessible. So I would invite you, but we'll be careful about consulting it, right? So your privacy, was it impacted? If yes, are your families concerned?
They are, but that's as far as it goes. I said not to worry. I'm well protected. Don't worry. That's just the way it is.
Inacceptable.
That's unacceptable. Yes. My husband and I, well, given the type of life that I and we live, we don't have a private life. That's the truth, more or less. For my son, he's young, he's afraid, he worries about things like nuclear war, so that he wonders whether we're in danger Are we doing anything dangerous? So yes, it exists, but obviously we have to live with this. And we have to be aware that the threat exists. Thank you for your question. On a daily basis, no. My 3 children have accepted that Dad travels, takes photos, and they follow me on social media. For those who are entitled to have an account, in all truth, I don't bring my children to many public events, but I have a concern, and that is that my children are part Chinese, part ethnically Chinese, part Jewish. And when I look at all of the demonstrations taking place in the streets, when I see the racism against people of Asian origin, I'm concerned about the culture in our country and the harmful effect that these campaigns have. These campaigns by foreign agents, I worry about the impact this will have on our society and on our culture. Thank you.
One of the reasons that we were given at this committee for why MPs within the IPAC group were not informed was that there was an active investigation underway, and there was a belief that that might become public, which would interfere with any further investigation. Do you accept that as a reason?
No. Again, they know how to run their part of this operation. We're parliamentarians, so we don't necessarily understand their rationale, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Don't try to protect me. I can protect myself, but I have to know if there's a serious threat out there. I want to know. It's not going to probably change much, but I want to know if it's a serious, and I can't see the rationale for not sharing that information.
Maybe further to that, in terms of what Mr. Hardy was asking, I do worry in terms of, I'm not one side or the other whether we release the names or not. I see the harm in terms of that court of public opinion. We work in very public, as we've just said, jobs. What does that do to a parliamentarian? Because in my estimation, intelligence isn't always evidence. So for that investigation, how do we allow that to happen if we could merge both questions?
Then we have to fix the system. That's like a real serious problem if intelligent isn't evidence. And again, this goes back to my initial point of what I perceive to be a naivety and a necessity to revamp the entire system, given, I think that, as I said, I believe it's a result of naivety. I believe that it's a result of indifference, of inaction, incompetence. But it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to trust what's in the report. That's a huge problem. And I really hope, whether it's this government or another government, can address that so that when something is published, we can have confidence in it. If not, what does that say about us as a nation, that we can't even have faith in what is supposed to be the most sound, most sensitive report, the information within that? I think that's a pretty sad statement, and I hope one day to live in a state where we can trust a report such as that and the information within it. Thank you.
Okay, that's about it, Ms. Matheson. But Mr. Kmitch, if you have a quick response, welcome to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My only response would be to go back to the very beginning of my statement and what I said in the House of Commons. The Government of Canada, when dealing with legislators, has a positive responsibility to tell us. We have a need to know. They had a moral and ethical responsibility to tell us, and they failed.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Kmitch, Ms. Cusi, Ms. Sgro, thank you very much for joining us today. We very much appreciate your reflection. Colleagues, I think we've had a very productive and another set of insightful meetings. Thank you for your cooperation today. Meeting adjourned.